All right, welcome back to the Andre Duke Show with Carter Smith. How is everybody doing out there this evening? We got a myriad of things going on tonight. You got Kennesaw State taking on UTEP. You've got James Madison taking on Texas State, and then also we've got little NHL action and the World Series going on. So a pretty good sporting day, to say the least. But I guess we can partly by kicking this thing off. It is a very fascinating time out there in the college football world, to say the least. But before we get to everything going on the show, if you could do us the biggest favor and hit the like and subscribe button, that helps us a ton. And then also, I guess I'll leave the phone lines open. Also, the number to call, 260-255-4069. And we'll take your calls for a bit. We'll probably have a hard out at 9 o'clock. So there's that. As well. Sorry, I'm just doing a little retweeting here. But yeah, so we kick it off. As some people suspect, there's the hot board for LSU. Here's the thing that I'm most fascinated and puzzled with when it comes to this LSU coaching search. I feel like it is to the point of no return. LSU made a decision. They made a, what do they owe Kelly? 60 some odd $1 million. It's to the point to where old BK is going to be laughing straight to the bank. I hope the folks at LSU realize that. I hope a lot of people realize that, and it's very fascinating, to say the least. I just don't know where the bottom is going to fall out. So there's that. For the most part, I guess we can go down it. Lane Kiffin is linked to every job opening there is known to man. And I want to start that off by saying, because Florida was pushing real hard for Lane Kiffin, now LSU has thrown their hat in the ring. What if Lane Kiffin doesn't leave LSU? What if he doesn't? Or not LSU, but what if he doesn't leave Ole Miss? That's the thing I'm curious about. So if you take Lane Kiffin out of the equation, Marcus Freeman ain't leaving on Notre Dame. Kenny Dillingham to LSU, maybe, but I mean, he's at his alma mater and seems really happy. Seems like they like him. Now, the guy that I like on this list to be the next head coach at LSU, Jeff Brom. I think Jeff Brom would do a good job there. He wins big games, I can tell you that much. He does win big games. He won big games at Purdue, and he's, pretty much a proven track record. Drinkowitz, I think he stays at Missouri. I don't think he dives into the Florida thing. And my thing is that when you're looking at this, hindsight 2020, if you go to Florida's history, they didn't win anything for almost 100 years. It took them 100 years to win the SEC. They didn't start winning anything until a high rate until Spurrier got there. Obviously, Ron Zook didn't work out, but Spurrier leaves them and goes to the NFL. And Ron Zook, obviously meets his demise. They hire Urban Meyer, and Urban Meyer went 8-5 his last year at Florida, and I think that they were going to fire him. I know people want to argue with me on that, but I am sticking to that one, that they were going to fire Urban Meyer at Florida. And the big thing is that when it comes to this, people don't like facts. Now, Clark Lee at Vanderbilt to LSU, don't know if Clark Lee's going to leave, because that guy, I think, is staring a lifetime contract right in the face. I don't know how you would say, hey, Clark, we're going to give you a lifetime contract. Oh, wait, you want to go to LSU where your life expectancy as being the head coach there is very, very low? I'm just saying, I don't know what it's gonna take for some people to kind of realize that he's probably not going to leave Vanderbilt. Brett Key, I don't think he's leaving Georgia Tech. He's finally got them rolling, and they got a $60 million investment from a $60 million gift, I think, 2 years ago. I think that is something to be said there. So there's that. Now, John Summerall, I think Jeff Brom and Summerall are the two candidates on this list that I think will get the most buzz and traction. If I was going to make the hire at LSU, those would be the two guys that I would circle on my list. Now, the Brian Kelly stuff, I seen people asking questions, where does Brian Kelly land? I don't think Brian Kelly lands anywhere. I think Brian Kelly probably just rides off into the sunset with his, $50+ million, and then you don't have to do anything anymore. That's where I'm at on it when it comes to Brian Kelly. If I'm him, somebody took a picture of him at a restaurant in Louisiana. I think it would be fascinating, because a lot of times coaches leave and they go back to where they were. I don't think BK would go back to. I don't think he's going to go to the group of five. Now, if it'll be interesting on how the group of five carousel turns. I think that it's very, very likely that Brian Kelly to Penn State heats up, because allegedly Marcus Freeman told Penn State no. I think that I don't think you're going to get Marcus Freeman to leave. That's the thing. If you're at Notre Dame, you have it relatively rolling. Why the hell would you want to go to a bigger program with higher expectations and more pressure? Not to say that the Notre Dame expectations and pressure isn't big, but I'm just saying, why would you want to subject yourself to that when you don't have to? Is my thought process on that. And also, when it comes to Marcus Freeman, his whole family is either in Indiana or is in Ohio. It would basically mean that he would be taking his whole family away from everything they've ever known. And he's embraced the Notre Dame thing. When they were talking about the possible Ohio State thing ramping up, about if they were going to get rid of Ryan Day, I don't think that they were going to get Marcus Freeman to jump on the bandwagon. Realistically, I don't think that was happening. So I think, for the most part, if Kiffin and Freeman completely take themselves out of the carousel, Dillingham, the noise isn't getting loud yet for him to where he's going to come out, because I think Kenny Dillingham's the type of guy that will come out and say, yeah, I'm not leaving. That's kind of what I think will happen. But that's kind of the rundown of where I'm sitting from that angle of it. I don't know what the realistic expectation everybody has as far as that, but I think that, apologize if my computer is making noise, but I just don't see it. If you're those guys, why leave? Why do anything? You don't have to. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think that some of the group of 5 coaches are going to get looks, but we'll see how that whole thing shakes out. And then also the Texas A&M thing. I know a lot of people want to make fun of Texas A&M and that, but I think Texas A&M is for real. I don't know how you don't say they're not for real, but it's kind of one of those things that A&M is. They always throw out there Texas A&M 8-4, 7-5. They start really well but don't finish well. I think this is a different Texas A&M we're seeing. I think realistically the fans got it right when they blew up and pushed back against Mark Stoops, and I think that they're relatively right on this one. The fans got it right. That's kind of where I'm looking at it, and it's just, I'm not going to say it's bizarre, but it's very interesting that it took Texas A&M to go into Baton Rouge and win like they did for people to give them their due finally. I think a lot of people slept on Texas A&M, and I don't think that's not a fair criticism. So there is that. But also the big thing that came out, the NCAA letting college athletes bet on professional sports. I think that this is a slippery slope. I don't know how many people agree with that, but the slippery slope of the betting is, I'm not on board with this, with everything that's going on with the Terry Rozier stuff. We're going to see where the bottom falls out with the NBA on the gambling things, but I'm not a legal expert by any means, but I will sit up here and say that I think it's Greg. I agree with Greg Sankey. He says it's a step in the wrong way. I think it's a bad decision to allow it, for one. I think there will be too much trading of game plans, trading of information. Because, see, at the end of the day, FanDuel tracks everyone who bets. They track what part of the region you live in. They're tracking everything. And I don't think people realize that. So if they have, let's just say, we'll make up, and you also had the Shohei Ohtani stuff that just quietly went away. But here's the thing. It's fascinating because you could have anybody that was, let's say you had a big-time quarterback at your university that got drafted in the first round to whatever team, and he's still got boys on the team that can bet on the game. You don't think they're picking up the phone and calling people? Come on. You don't think that would be like, oh, what's the game plan look like this week? Oh, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. You don't think that's not going to happen? That you are opening such a big can of worms going down this. going down this rabbit hole. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube if you open it up. You've already had the issues at Iowa State, and people placing bets. I just feel like that you're really going down the wrong road with this. And then also Pat Narduzzi comes out and says, who called it one of the stupidest decisions I've ever seen. And that's big, me bringing up Pat Narduzzi on this program, because one thing that I'll say is I don't hardly ever agree with Pat Narduzzi in the likelihood of Pitt athletics. But that's just my opinion, and me agreeing with Pat Narduzzi is very, very bizarre, to say the least. And then also we will go to the bottom 25. UMass, Sam Houston, Oklahoma State. For the bottom rung of people that are here, these collection of programs, I mean, Colorado State fired their coach. Rich Rod is completely rebuilding West Virginia. I think that's a work in progress. Penn State has fallen off the rails. We'll see what it comes down to. UTEP, they have no resources. North Carolina, I don't know how that's going to fall into place, but as I'm reading this tweet, Stuart Mandel, he retweets the viewership for this week, which is fascinating. Bama, South Carolina, 7.8 million. A&M, LSU, 6.8 million. Ole Miss, Oklahoma, 6.6 million. Those are all ABC games. NBC comes in with 3.6 with Michigan State. Missouri, Vandy did a 3-1 in the noon window. And then Fox comes in with Indiana, UCLA, and then BYU, Iowa State. And he writes, this is the third straight week that the ABC SEC games sweep the top 3 positions. Well, I think that people should be aware of that. I just look at it and I don't know what else you want to say at this point. They have ABC and ESPN. The advertising dollar is going to command when that contract comes up. And I think the possible realignment stuff is going to be coming. I think there's going to be programs that have decisions to make, to say the least. You're going to have big programs, especially ACC and Big 12 programs, have to make a decision because I think the third hat to drop here is going to be, I think you're going to get a collection of teams in the American Conference merging with teams. You're going to have teams merging. What's left of the Big 12 and what's left of the ACC and the American are probably going to form something. I think that programs like how do I want to put this? Boston College, Pitt, NC State. The Big Ten doesn't. I think the Big Ten, if they took anybody from the ACC, they'd take Duke and Boston College. They're not going to take Pitt. Pitt literally brings nothing to the table, in my opinion. But, oh boy, out the gate, 88, Kennesaw State. Man, punt return for a touchdown. But it's very fascinating to say the least. Well, I guess we'll get to the realignment when it comes down, but also in other news, Michigan Wolverines dropped their appeal in the sign stealing thing, which I personally think that some people should go out and make apologies. I was one of the people that was duped in that. I am not going to lie. I got duped. I got fed some bad information. We talked about it, and then at the end of the day, we just backed off of it because nothing had happened, and we just kind of were on the point of whatever Michigan gets is what they're going to get, regardless if we do not like it. It is what it is. No one wants to talk about the fact that Michigan, they did what they did, and it is what it is. At the end of the day, you got to move on. They are going to kick the games off. So there's that. It is what it is. The suspension's been served, and there is that. And I don't know what else you can do with it, but hold on, I am sending a text currently. But it is what it is. Michigan moves on, and that's that. So I think quite possibly it's what it is, and I think that we'll look at some games here coming up, but outside of that, I think those are some of the bigger headlines. We'll see where it falls out, but I'm just not subscribing to it being a big deal. It kind of was a nothing burger. Got all kinds of people in their feels on it, and chalk it up to them. There's that. But getting into some games here, Memphis plays Rice. I would say that's going to be a blowout on Friday night, and then the Saturday slate, the noon window, I guess is pretty decent. Ohio State, Penn State. Penn State is basically a walking corpse at this point. Do I give Penn State a legitimate shot? No. Ohio State is a 20.5-point favorite as it sits right now. The biggest cocktail party, I guess I don't call it that anymore for whatever reason. Florida, Georgia. I think that if Kirby gets the how do I want to say this, the opportunity to rub it in, he might. He knows Billy Napier, so that could be a big opportunity right there. And then at 7 p.m., which I know Lane Kiffin has lobbied big time for this, Ole Miss gets a night game. They're taking on South Carolina. I would say, barring anything catastrophic, Ole Miss should roll on. And I think, in my mind, when it comes to the Ole Miss thing, I know a lot of the Ole Miss fans get all tense and tight and they worry. I think that for them, as long as you get the game and you win, whether it's 2-0, 3-0, as long as you put a W in the column, that's the biggest thing for Ole Miss. There's a lot of distractions with the Lane Kiffin Florida stuff, and I get it. They got a lot of things they got to, work on, and then they go out and they beat Oklahoma. They've beaten LSU. The big thing for Ole Miss, I think their toughest thing is Kennesaw State scored again. Oh, wow. But I think the big thing for Ole Miss is that they got to focus on not getting into a debate because Ole Miss controls their own destiny. Do they end up in Atlanta? Maybe. I think that's something for Ole Miss fans to take into consideration. But they've just got to beat the team in front of them, and they can't beat themselves. The Trinidad Chambliss thing, I think if Ole Miss wins the SEC and Lane Kiffin and Trinidad Chambliss are standing on the podium, the biggest thing for Florida is that, I know I said I wasn't going to really get into this, but the biggest thing for Florida is if Ole Miss keeps winning, that waters down your chances tremendously, because I don't think Lane Kiffin's going to take Ole Miss to heights that they've never been before and then jump out the door and go to Florida where he's already got a foundation and everything built. I just don't see it. But Ole Miss, 12.5-point favorites against South Carolina. And I'll give my opinion on the Shane Beamer stuff. I've talked about it. I think Beamer is good as gone at South Carolina. I think it's done. It's over. I don't think they're going to fire him, but I think it's going to be a mutual separation. I think he's the head coach at Virginia Tech. I think it was South Carolina put a lot of equity into this year. Lenore Sellers is, I think, going to be able to go pro. If he's going pro, it's looking grim and bare down there in Columbia. I know the South Carolina folks probably aren't going to want to hear that, but you're sitting at 3-5. Missed opportunity against LSU. You lose to Alabama. You beat Virginia Tech. It's one of those things, and then you get boat raced by Vandy. Missouri takes care of you pretty handedly. You lose to Oklahoma, which a game that you won last year. You didn't do much on offense against Oklahoma, and then you beat Kentucky. I don't know if that's something you want to hang your hat on, but barring anything catastrophic, you catch an L this week, you're 3-6 going into a bye week. I don't think they're going to make a change to trigger a buyout. I don't think that's in South Carolina's DNA. And then, you have A&M, Coastal, and Clemson. Technically, you'd have to win out to get to a bowl game. I don't see it. I think South Carolina is fried turkey this week. And for the rest of the year, I think Dabo probably will get it back on track at Clemson. I know they put a ton of stock into this year at Clemson, and it hasn't bode well for them. But and then in the ABC night game, you have tons of storylines there. You have Oklahoma taking on Tennessee. They're on the road at Knoxville. We'll see. That's going to be a fascinating thing for me, because that's going to be one of the games we're going to stream. We'll stream Tennessee, Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia, and Vandy, Texas this week as well. I'm going to try to do 3 time slots. Notre Dame traveling on the road to Boston College. Boston College took a major step back, I thought. They just weren't. I think Notre Dame should roll in that one. Vandy, Texas is going to be fascinating. Texas is only 2.5-point favorites on their home field. Very interesting. Miami's going to travel to SMU this week. I think that is going to be a fascinating game, because SMU, for all intents and purposes, it'll be interesting to see how Rhett Lashley rallies the troops there, because they could be on quit watch. But if they come out and they beat Miami puts their season into someone else's hands yet again. And I think in South Beach, it's going to get restless. Do they move on from Mario Cristobal? But, hey, with the way it's been this year, Mario Cristobal back-to-back 10-2 seasons gets fired. Ouch. is all I'm saying. So that's something to keep an eye on. Houston has West Virginia to come into town. I think Houston, and I think Houston is, they keep winning, they're going to get in the they're going to get the push to possibly make the playoffs. That'd be a hell of a turnaround for Willie Fritz after not really a disappointing first year. They weren't as good as what they thought they were going to be, but the kind of resurgence of Connor Wagman, I think in 2 more years, Houston's going to be legit. They got a lot of players in that area. As long as Willie Fritz is recruiting them. So there is that. Louisville goes to Virginia Tech. I don't know where that's going to. I think Louisville rolls, because if Miami slips up and some of these other programs keep winning, Miami could find themselves on the outside looking in for 2 years in a row. So there is that. Indiana, big favorites against Maryland. I think that's very fascinating. Indiana on the road, I don't know if it's going to matter. It probably won't. Texas Tech taking on the disappointed season that they've been having at Kansas State. It'll be interesting to see what Avery Johnson does. He's getting paid a lot of money there. Kansas State was billed to be one of the top contenders in the Big 12, and it just has not worked out at all, anything that they've done. And one of the other adversaries for Miami is if Virginia keeps winning, they got to go on the road to Cal this week. That kick is a weird kick. It's at 3:45 Eastern. So it's 12:45 there. We'll see if Tony Elliott can keep it rolling. Michigan is probably going to dismantle Purdue. Barry Odom, first year, it is what it is. At this point, Purdue, probably they're trying to gather funds to go out and acquire talent, which it's an arms race now. I feel like a broken record now that I'm saying it over and over. Virginia Tech on the road at NC State, been kind of disappointing this year for Dave Doran and co. I think that's something to be said there. If Virginia Tech improves to 9-0, it's to the point to where the ACC's they're going to have a bunch of 10 or 11 win teams. Not everybody can make the conference championship, and that's why I'm saying it's so imperative for Ole Miss to keep on winning, because their resume is not that impressive if they get into a shot to where they have to have the committee to decide, because Ole Miss has beaten Georgia State, beat the hell out of Georgia State, beat Kentucky by a touchdown, beat Arkansas, beat Tulane, beat LSU. But now that LSU has fired Brian Kelly, they could turn into a corpse. Oklahoma is on the verge of turning into a corpse. And the only team that they would argue that you've played really that has a pulse is Georgia, and you lost. So that's where that comes down to it. And I have a very, very keen eye on the Ole Miss South Carolina game. I think that's going to be interesting, to say the least. USC comes to Nebraska. I think it would be in Matt Rule's best interest to win that game, just in my opinion. I know the Penn State people, after they get bludgeoned by Ohio State, they will be watching that very intently. So there's that. And then the nightcap, Cincinnati on the road at Utah. Utah, if they can win that game, they have every intention of getting back into the playoff hunt, to be honest. So there is that. I think that looking at the Saturday slate as a whole, the North Carolina Syracuse on Friday night is going to be very fascinating, to say the least. And I don't know. Also, the Phil Longo thing at Sam Houston isn't going well. they're staring at 0-7 going to La Tech. Who knows where that bounces back. Clemson 3-4 right now. They taking on Duke. That could be a loser. Hugh Freeze might be able to ride the ship because of everybody else firing everyone. Auburn might stay put and give him another year. I could definitely see that happening. As far as some other notables, I'm scrolling through and looking at this. Although I find it interesting, if Stanford beats Pitt, do they keep Frank Reich as their coach? I think that'll be a fascinating deal. Mississippi State takes on Arkansas. I'll be interested to see how that game goes. That's an interesting one. Another 4:00 Eastern kick. Mississippi State, Arkansas. Oklahoma State is probably going to get bludgeoned by Kansas. I think that is going to be a fascinating deal. Colorado, yes. This is what I was looking for. Here's the deal. Colorado took Arizona to the woodshed last year, and they got to go on the road to Boulder. Does Colorado either fight or fold? That's going to be the question, I think. So yeah, Florida State sitting at 3-4. It's going to be interesting to see how that one shakes out. And then the other late night game is Hawaii at San Jose State. And look at Tommy Chang turning that program around. I think that Tommy has done a pretty good job at Hawaii. I know people weren't looking at that, but also back to the coaching buyout thing. $168 million to fired coaches. And here's the list. Billy Napier, $21 million. Mike Gundy, $15 million. Sam Pittman, $9.8 million. Brent Pry, Virginia Tech, $6 million. Deshaun Foster, $5 million. Trent Bray, $4 million. Trent Dilfer, $2.4 million. Jay Norvell, $1.5 million. And then you add the massive numbers, the $49 million owed to James Franklin and the $54 million owed to Brian Kelly. I think that at a certain point, when those bills come due, it's going to be fascinating. Also, here's the thing. I guess Arch Manning is in concussion protocol. That is not a good sign for Texas. I think that, going forward, here's the chaos of it. If Texas loses to Vanderbilt, it is going to be over. Their season is over. I hate to be that guy, but with three losses, it's not gonna be copacetic for Sark. That's just my opinion. Some people don't think it's gonna be there, but I talked to a former coach today for about 15 minutes, and we were going over the scenarios, and I was asking him a couple of questions, and I told him I'm, pretty much Lane Kiffin talked out, but I was talking to him about it, and he told me that there is going to be too many openings and not enough coaches. So here's my thing, and we'll get everybody out of here. I know I started the show late, but here's where I stand on this. If you are Florida and you do not get Lane Kiffin, if you're LSU and you do not get Lane Kiffin, what do you do? That is the question. Because I don't think these athletic directors are going back to the drawing board. I think that they're just thinking they are going to get the guy. Now, the best opening by far is LSU. That is one of the top 3 jobs in America. Behind when Alabama wins, when you're a winner at Alabama, I think the top jobs are Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, LSU. I think those are the Rushmore jobs. The reason why Texas is because when you win, it's full kimono. You're the only ticket in town in a lot of those places because realistically, let's talk about pro football in Ohio. Not very good. Just throwing it out there. It's like the Browns. It's like the Browns and the Bengals have not won anything, and you continuously get bullied by Pittsburgh, and that's just what it is. But also that's kind of, par for the course. But the Browns have never made any good decisions ever. They have never really won any. They haven't won a division title since 1989. That's before I was even born. So put that in perspective. So the only thing you have in the state of Ohio that's worth a damn are the Buckeyes. So, and I think Ohio State rolls this week. And here's the other side of the coin with Penn State. If you don't get Matt Rule, who are you going to hire? Because allegedly Marcus Freeman told you no. So I'm hearing Brian Hartline's name come up. I mean, it would be a big gamble on Penn State's part. It would be a major gamble on Penn State's part. Because you would take a first-year head coach. But I also think that at a certain extent, you've got to, at Penn State, you've got to do something. You've got to try something that's kind of outside of the box, realistically. Where has Penn State lacked? They've had pretty good defense, but it's been on the offensive side of the ball. Can Brian Hartline go there and remodel and retool that offense, get players that can play? And with it being his first year being the offensive play caller, I mean, I think he was one of the finalists for the West Virginia job, but I think as quiet as kept, that job was spoken for, even though Hartline interviewed for it. That's just my opinion. So the path to being a head coach used to be you would be a top flight coordinator. You would go to the group of 5, turn them into a conference championship winner / get them ranked, win 10, 11 games, go dominate a conference for a year or 2, and then you got out of there. And then, the big schools came calling because they would say, well, we have proof of concept, blah, 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 blah. Well, now, when we're hiring head coaches, we are either stealing other big programs guys, or we're hiring coordinators that a lot of times have never had head coaching experience. So I think it's a slippery slope going forward on how we're acquiring head coaches. Now, do I totally agree with the fact that there are going to be a ton of openings and not enough coaches to fill them? Yes. I think that is a distinct possibility, to say the least. I don't know how it's going to shake out, but I think for the most part, it's one of those that, if you're Penn State, you got to do something. I think that they thought in the beginning that they were going to go big game hunting, and they had Kiffin circled, and I think they found out very quick that wasn't happening. It's just one of those deals. I don't foresee it getting worse, but you have to have somebody that is committed to being at Penn State. That's the biggest thing right there. Oh wow, Rex Ryan throwing his name in the hat for the LSU job on ESPN today. That ought to be interesting. So, but I get it. And I think that it's going to be fascinating on how this turns out, to be 100% honest with you. I don't think that I just can't get myself to the place to where Indiana, the Hoosiers, and Vanderbilt are more of a contender for the playoffs than LSU and Florida. Like, does that not just seem like it's bizarre in the world? But, Cignetti's done a heck of a job. I think Pate talked about it, about the the strength coach deal at LSU, when one of Brian Kelly's first things he did when he got there was he fired the strength coach, and the strength coach goes to Texas A&M, and then lo and behold, tonight not tonight, but Saturday night in Baton Rouge, the strength coach comes, and there's that. Scott Wise chimes in and says, not just IU and the Colts also. Well, I think the Colts gambled on Daniel Jones, and it really worked out for them. That's what I think happened. But also the other thing too, in the coaching carousel, I think that one of the things that people need to look at as well, you may have 5 NFL openings. That's the other thing, because I think Mike McDaniels is toast for the most part. I don't think he's going. I think they're just going to let him wear it and coach the rest of the season, because I think Miami's fried. One of the things that I was looking at is I don't think that the Giants move on from Brian Daboll, to be honest, because I think Jackson Dart really, really likes him, and I think they'll win more games than what people think. Aaron Glenn at the Jets is also listed on the hot seat. I don't know how. He has no quarterback, and it's also the Jets. And the Browns and Bengals are on there. No Burrow. I don't know how you can hold that against Zach Taylor. The Browns, I look at it as, if you fire Stefanski, who are you going to get? I mean, I get it. It's like, who are you going to get if you get rid of him? That's my thing. And also, I know people hate it when I do this, but I'm just saying, if you fire the coach, who are you going to hire? And that's whether it's professional football, or whether it's the NFL or college. You have to have some semblance of a plan. And I think a lot of these universities did not have a plan in place when they made their decision. That's just my opinion. I think that they made decisions based on reading social media, and I think a lot of these athletic directors are reading social media. But the telling part was when, in the second half, when they came out, LSU just completely, it fell apart for them. I really think that to say the least. They made their decision in the fourth quarter when everyone left and the fire Kelly chants rang out, and I think that they just said, we got to do something here. So that's where I think that decision was made. Do I think a decision will be made going forward on who they hire? I think LSU's candidates, they have more of a candidate list than what Florida does. But I guess we'll end it with the playoff chances. CBS posted the schools with the playoff odds. Ohio State leads the way. A&M right behind them. Georgia. Those are the all 90%. And then the 80% are Indiana, Alabama, Ole Miss. And then it drops real big. Oregon at 74, Virginia Tech at 61%, and then Notre Dame at 47%, Miami at 43%, and then it falls off really big there. But teams with the outside chances are Houston, Utah, Oklahoma, Pitt, UNLV. It's got Kansas State. How? Well, oh my gosh. I think the group of 5 representative will be Tulane until it's not Tulane. So there's where that's what I look at it as. I think Tulane will be the representative for the group of 5. So there's that, and then there's the Vegas books are saying the next head coach at LSU, the best odds is Lane Kiffin. So I guess we'll see where the Lane Kiffin stuff falls apart, but there's that. And then also the Heisman odds have been updated. Mendoza from Indiana is leading the way. Ty Simpson, Julian Sayin, Marcel Reed, Diego Pavia, Gunnar Stockton, Hayes King, Jeremiah Love, Trinidad Chambliss, Jeremiah Smith. Now, the top 3 guys, I think Marcel Reed will get a big bump if they win the SEC championship. That's truly what I think. I think they'll get a major bump if they win the SEC championship. And if Julian Sayin beats Michigan and Ohio State stays undefeated, I think that whatever quarterback that's in the Heisman race, because realistically looking at the Big Ten championship, it's going to be Indiana. It could be Indiana, Ohio State, Ty Simpson versus Marcel Reed, Alabama, A&M, and whoever has the most convincing win, I think, out of those 2 will end up being the Heisman Trophy winner. Like if A&M or if Alabama goes and blows the doors off of A&M and Ty Simpson plays really well, it could be that. That's what you could be looking at realistically. Now, is there a world where Jeremiah Smith could win the Heisman? I know the fans would like him to win the Heisman, but I don't think it's realistic, to be honest. I think it's just strictly now a quarterback award. I know some people don't want to believe that, but if Mendoza goes out and wins the Big Ten, if they could go out and win the Big Ten and somehow beat Ohio State and do it convincingly, then Mendoza probably does win the Heisman. I would not be shocked by that at all. So I think that, we're coming into a period of time to where the playoff teams are really, really going to separate themselves. And then also this a little bit ago on the gambling thing, It says Heat guard Terry Rozier placed on leave amid gambling allegations, blah, 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 blah. From 2023, faced an $8 million tax lien from the IRS in the same year. So that whole NBA gambling thing that's going to be a very fascinating deal, to say the least. And I think Greg Sankey, the reason why he pushed back against it, and Narduzzi and a lot of the other folks were looking at it, they were looking at it because it directly affects their program. I don't think people realize that when you have something like that directly affects the program and the sport itself, they don't want to be associated with it. And I don't think anybody wants to lose a player they can't afford to lose because he wanted to bet the Cowboys over under, or he gave out insider information. I think there's a lot of that goes on. So also when the Brian Kelly news broke, Malik Neighbors also posted that Brian Kelly should kick rocks, or it was somebody kicking rocks. So that was a, backhanded compliment towards Kelly. But to be honest, I think it was pretty much mutual. Like Pate said on his show, he said Brian Kelly didn't like LSU and LSU didn't like Brian Kelly. Now, the one thing I will say, I think that he was super checked out. I don't think Josh Pate would have said that he was checked out if he wasn't. So that's kind of where I stand on it. I think that, if they don't, LSU's probably going to get the best candidate out there. I think the candidate that I would want would either be Brom or John Summerall. Those are my two. I think Kentucky is going to try to do the whole, hey, John, we love you, John. And I don't think it'll resonate. I think Summerall will basically take his ball and go home. I think if Summerall doesn't end up at LSU, I think he stays at Tulane. But I could also see the most Arkansas thing ever is that they keep Petrino. That would be the most Arkansas thing ever, to be honest. I think that if Arkansas made that decision and it didn't work, would be very fascinating. But there's that. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the show. Got to see what coordinators move. Nothing really in the carousel is going to move until the season's over, so keep that in mind. I guess we'll see where the Penn State stuff shakes out. So yeah, there is that. Also, if you made it this far in the show and you like this content, please hit the like and subscribe button and help us grow this thing. That would be much appreciated, and I appreciate all of you guys for watching the show, and we will see you tomorrow.